Maya Danielle's heart raced as she glanced at the bus stop from her apartment window. The man was there again, slouched over against the cold concrete, his dirty, weathered clothes blending into the dull gray morning. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she watched him. He wasn't new to her neighborhood. She'd seen him around for weeks. She wasn't sure how long he had been living there, but it felt like forever. Every day he sat there, eyes downcast, barely acknowledging the world around him. Her own life wasn't much better. Juggling a part-time job at the hospital and another at the local grocery store left her little time to breathe. Her rent was due again, and she could barely scrape together enough to cover it, let alone any extra expenses. Still, every morning as she left her apartment, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as she walked past the man at the bus stop. He didn't have anyone. No one seemed to care. That morning, something stirred within her. As she grabbed her bag, she found herself heading toward the kitchen. She dug through her small fridge, pulling out peanut butter and a loaf of bread. With a quick, practiced hand, she spread a generous amount of peanut butter on 2 slices of bread, then grabbed a bottle of water. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maya stepped out into the cool morning air, her sneakers hitting the cracked pavement with a soft thud. She approached the bus stop cautiously, keeping her eyes on the man. When she was close enough, she cleared her throat, just loud enough to get his attention. "Hey, you hungry?" she asked, holding out the sandwich and bottle of water. The man lifted his head slowly, blinking as if he hadn't expected to be spoken to. His eyes, though tired and sunken, gleamed with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. For a moment, he just stared at the food in her hands, unsure of what to make of it. Yeah, sure," he muttered, taking the sandwich with a trembling hand. He didn't say much after that, his focus returning to the food in front of him. Maya felt a knot in her stomach. Was he going to thank her? Maybe he thought it was too little to matter. But as she turned to leave, she heard a faint voice behind her. "Thanks," he said, quieter this time. She smiled to herself, feeling a small, fleeting sense of accomplishment. Maybe it was nothing, just a sandwich, just a small gesture, but it meant something. She didn't know how she could help him any more than that, but she knew she'd be back tomorrow. The next morning, Maya stood in front of her kitchen counter, staring at the loaf of bread. Her alarm clock had barely gone off, but she felt restless. It was only when she noticed the empty seat at the bus stop that she realized she was already thinking about him. The homeless man, Samuel, she remembered. He had introduced himself the day before, just after she'd given him the sandwich. As much as she tried to avoid thinking about it, something about Samuel tugged at her heart. He wasn't just a nameless face in the crowd. He had a name. He had a past. And for some reason, she felt responsible for him. She couldn't quite explain it, but she didn't want to let it go. Not today. Not ever. Maya quickly made another sandwich, this time with a piece of fruit and a cup of coffee to go along with it. She knew she couldn't keep coming back just for the food. There had to be more she could do for him. She walked out of the apartment, still unsure of what exactly she was about to do, but feeling the pull of something deeper. When she arrived at the bus stop, Samuel was already there, perched on the bench with his usual slumped posture. Maya handed him the sandwich and coffee without hesitation. "Good morning, Samuel," she said, offering him a warm smile. Samuel's eyes softened slightly as he took the food. "Morning," he mumbled, nodding. "I didn't expect you to come back." "I said I would," Maya replied. "I meant it." He looked up at her for a moment, as if trying to make sense of her presence. His face was weathered and tired, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, a kind of guarded hope, something Maya couldn't quite put her finger on. "I've been around here a long time, you know," he said slowly, his voice raspy. "I've seen a lot of people come and go, but you're different." Maya frowned. "How so?" He took a bite of the sandwich before responding. "Most people just ignore me, or they offer me a couple of bucks and then move on. No one really asks me how I'm doing. No one gives a damn." Maya's heart clenched. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way." Samuel shook his head. It's not your fault. It's just the way things are. People forget about people like me. People like you got things to do, places to be. I'm just here, you know? Maya could feel the weight of his words. Well, she said softly, I'm not going anywhere. Samuel didn't say anything else. But he ate the sandwich in silence, and that was enough. For both of them. Over the next few weeks, Maya continued to bring Samuel breakfast every morning. Her financial struggles became even more apparent as rent deadlines came and went, but she kept showing up at the bus stop without fail. Peanut butter sandwiches, fruit, coffee, small acts, but they became part of her daily routine. And it wasn't just the food. She started sitting with him, talking to him. At first, Samuel didn't have much to say, but eventually he began to open up. His stories about his past military service were fragmented at first, incoherent at times, as if he was still struggling to piece together the reality of his own life. But the more he spoke, the clearer the picture became. He had served in a series of highly classified missions so secretive that even his military records were locked away. He spoke of places and situations he couldn't quite remember clearly but sounded familiar, as though he'd been living in a haze for years. His words were often jumbled, and Maya didn't fully understand the gravity of what he was saying. But there was something about his presence that made her listen. One morning, as Maya handed him a sandwich, Samuel looked up at her with a serious expression. You're not the first person who's tried to help me, he said, his voice shaking. But you're the first one who didn't just walk away. Maya blinked in surprise. What do you mean? He paused, taking a deep breath. I've been forgotten. You wouldn't believe how many people are out here, just like me. We get lost in the system. We don't have papers, we don't have IDs, we don't have anyone to vouch for us. He stopped, eyes narrowing. I was somebody once. But no one knows that now. Maya sat down beside him, her legs crossed in front of her. You are to me, she said again, her voice firm. And I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. Samuel didn't say anything else, but his fingers tightened around the sandwich, as if the simple act of her sitting beside him had made the difference. A few days later, everything changed. Samuel collapsed in front of the bus stop, clutching his chest in agony. Maya's heart stopped as she rushed to his side, panicked. She called an ambulance, her hands shaking as she held the phone to her ear. When the paramedics arrived, they had trouble identifying him, his lack of documentation complicating everything. When they rushed Samuel to the hospital, Maya followed closely behind. She couldn't leave him. Not now. Not after everything they'd shared. But once they arrived at the hospital, the staff seemed uncertain about how to proceed. Samuel had no ID, no medical records, no insurance. He was a nameless man, a veteran lost in the system. Maya stood at the counter demanding answers. He's a veteran, she insisted. I know he is. He told me about his service. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Ma'am, without documentation, we can't proceed without proper identification. But Maya refused to leave. She stood her ground, making calls, demanding that Samuel's status be checked. It took hours, but eventually, someone from the VA was able to verify his military record, though it was heavily classified, locked behind bureaucratic walls. Maya didn't care. She knew Samuel was a veteran. That was all that mattered. After Samuel's hospitalization, Maya continued to advocate for him. The next few weeks were filled with tense phone calls, visits to the VA, and meetings with military officials. And during it all, she kept hearing the same thing. Samuel's records were classified. No one could access them. But Maya wasn't deterred. She refused to let Samuel slip through the cracks. It wasn't long before Samuel's story became a matter of national attention, leading to a meeting with General Olivia Knight from the Pentagon. Through a series of fortunate events, Maya found herself standing before a group of military officials who finally acknowledged Samuel's service. Hidden, but significant. The days following Samuel's hospitalization were a blur for Maya. She spent long hours on the phone, talking to military officials, lawyers, and veterans organizations, all of them echoing the same frustrations. Samuel's military records were classified, buried behind walls of red tape that no one seemed willing to break. Every time she thought she'd found a breakthrough, another roadblock appeared, and she was forced to start all over again. Despite the mounting frustration, Maya couldn't stop. She couldn't walk away. Samuel had trusted her, and she would see this through. She had seen the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his past, and she had felt the weight of his words. She wasn't just fighting for a veteran. She was fighting for someone who had been forgotten by a system that was meant to care for him. One evening, Maya sat in the small living room of her apartment, staring at the piles of paperwork and phone numbers strewn across the coffee table. She was exhausted, but she refused to let herself rest. Samuel needed her. As she flipped through some forms, her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, her heart skipping when she saw the caller ID, Military Affairs Office. Taking a deep breath, Maya answered. "Hello, Maya Daniels?" The voice on the other end was sharp, authoritative. "This is Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Ford from Military Affairs. I'm calling about Samuel Reed. We've been able to verify his service records." Maya's pulse quickened. "You found them?" she asked, leaning forward, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "How? What happened?" "There's no easy way to explain this," Lieutenant Commander Ford continued. "Samuel Reed's records are classified, yes, but they've been buried for years. He was part of some covert operations, missions so classified that even the Pentagon had a hard time tracking them down. We've only just managed to access some of them." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What does that mean? How did he end up on the streets without help?" Samuel was one of the many veterans who fell through the cracks. His records were intentionally concealed for national security reasons. He was never properly discharged, and when his mental health started deteriorating, no one knew how to help him. The VA had no idea he even existed. He was lost. Maya's anger flared, the heat of it flooding her chest. "So he's been forgotten? Just forgotten?" she asked, her voice rising with the injustice. "Essentially, yes," Lieutenant Commander Ford replied, her voice softer now. "But we are working to rectify this. We need someone who can advocate for him publicly, someone who can help us bring attention to the system's failures. And frankly, we need someone who can be his voice, Maya. We need you." Maya was silent for a moment. The weight of the situation hit her all at once. This wasn't just about Samuel anymore. This was about all the veterans like him, men and women who had been left behind, whose sacrifices had been erased by bureaucracy. She knew what she had to do. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. "I'll do whatever it takes." Days later, Maya was seated in a small office at the Pentagon, facing General Olivia Knight. The walls around her were lined with military insignia and plaques, the weight of the space making Maya feel small. But she wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. General Knight was a woman in her mid-50s, her face sharp and commanding. She sat across from Maya, her expression unreadable as she folded her hands on the desk. "I've read the report, Ms. Daniels," she said. "Samuel Reed's case has become a matter of great concern. But it's not just about one man. It's about the countless others who are slipping through the cracks in the system. The VA has failed them, and we can't let that happen any longer." Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "I'm ready to speak out," she said. "I'm ready to testify before Congress. I'll do whatever I can to make sure no one else is forgotten like Samuel." General Knight leaned back in her chair, studying Maya for a moment. "We'll make sure your voice is heard, Ms. Daniels. But this won't be easy. There will be resistance. Not everyone will want to see the system exposed. But if you're willing to fight, we'll back you up." "I'm willing," Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Good," General Knight replied. "You're not just advocating for Samuel now. You're advocating for every veteran who has been lost. This is bigger than one person. We're about to take on the VA, and it won't be easy. But with your testimony, we can start a movement that will change the way veterans are treated. Are you ready for that?" Maya nodded, her resolve solidifying. "Yes, I'm ready." The Senate Armed Services Committee hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Maya spent every moment preparing, learning everything she could about the VA system, about the countless veterans who had suffered like Samuel. She knew the fight ahead of her would be long and difficult, but she also knew it was necessary. The day of the hearing arrived, and Maya stood in front of the committee, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been in a situation like this before. The room was filled with high-ranking officials, senators, and military officers. They all stared at her as she stepped forward to the microphone, the weight of their gazes making her feel smaller than she had ever felt before. "Ms. Daniels," the committee chair said, his voice cold and clinical. "You've been asked to speak today about the case of Samuel Reed, a veteran whose records have been lost in the system. Please, share with us what you know." Maya took a deep breath, steadying her hands on the podium. She could feel her pulse in her throat, but she refused to let the fear control her. This was bigger than her. This was for Samuel, for all the veterans who had been forgotten. "I know Samuel Reed," she began, her voice strong. "He's not just a statistic or a name on a list. He's a person. He's a man who served this country honorably, but his service was erased by the system that was supposed to protect him. He's a veteran who has suffered, who has been abandoned by the very institution that promised to care for him. And I'm here today to tell you that this isn't just about Samuel. This is about the thousands of veterans like him who are invisible to the system." Maya's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She pressed on, her words gaining strength. "I have seen firsthand the damage caused by this system. I've seen what happens when a veteran is forgotten, when they're left to die in the streets without anyone noticing. Samuel Reed is one of many, but we can't keep letting this happen. It's time for change. It's time for the VA to be held accountable." She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle over the room. "If we don't act now," she continued, "then we're all complicit. Samuel Reed's life, his service, it all matters. And we owe it to him, and to every other veteran, to make sure their sacrifices are recognized, not forgotten." There was a heavy silence in the room as Maya finished speaking. She felt the weight of the moment. This was her stand. This was her fight. After a long pause, the committee chair spoke again, his voice softer now. "Thank you, Ms. Daniels. We hear you, and we will make sure your words are heard." The hearing was the beginning of something much bigger. Maya's testimony sparked a movement, one that caught the attention of the media, the public, and even lawmakers. There were protests, petitions, and public outcries demanding action. In the weeks that followed, the Samuel Reed Memorial Fund was created, backed by a $5 million donation from the Department of Defense. The fund was dedicated to supporting homeless veterans with classified military records and reforming the VA tracking system. Maya was appointed as the fund's director, a role that both humbled and overwhelmed her. She knew she had made a difference, but she also knew the work was far from over. Samuel's legacy, his story, would live on in every veteran the fund helped. And that was just the beginning. As the year passed, Maya continued her work, managing the fund and mentoring others who wanted to help. The fund had already served over 2,000 veterans, providing them with health care, housing, and the support they needed to rebuild their lives. Samuel Reed's death had sparked something monumental, a change that was long overdue. One quiet afternoon, as Maya sat in her office reviewing the fund's progress, she received a letter. It was from General Olivia Knight. Inside was a photo of Samuel, a letter addressed to her, and a simple message: "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would." Maya smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. It wasn't just about Samuel anymore. It was about every person who had ever been overlooked, every story that had been buried. She had given them a voice, and in doing so, she had found her own. Months passed, and the Samuel Reed Memorial Fund continued to grow, both in influence and impact. What started as a grassroots effort to help one man had blossomed into a national movement, one that was slowly but surely beginning to reshape how veterans, especially those with classified military records, were treated by the system. Maya had become a fixture in the veterans' advocacy community. Her work with the fund had brought her into the lives of thousands of veterans, each with their own story of hardship, survival, and resilience. But no matter how many times she heard their stories, no matter how many faces she saw, she never stopped thinking about Samuel. His life and his death had sparked everything. He had been the one who had been left behind, forgotten by a system that was supposed to care for him. And Maya had promised herself that no more would follow in his footsteps. One afternoon, as Maya was sitting in her small office at the fund's headquarters, she received a call that made her stomach tighten. "Maya Daniels?" The voice on the other end was stern, professional. "This is Senator Carla Whitney. I'm calling to discuss the Fletcher Act." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had heard rumors of the bill, a legislative push to overhaul the VA system and improve the care and tracking of veterans with classified service records. But this was the first time she had heard its name in an official context. The Fletcher Act, named after Samuel Reed, was gaining traction in Congress. It was the legislative result of everything she had worked for, the culmination of months of testimony, hearings, and advocacy. "Yes, Senator Whitney," Maya replied, her voice steady. "How can I help?" "I've been following your work, Ms. Daniels," Senator Whitney said. "And frankly, I'm impressed by everything you've done for the veteran community. But I need your help. The Fletcher Act is scheduled for a full vote in the next week, and there's a good chance it will pass. But we need one final push. We need to make sure it passes with full support from both sides of the aisle." Maya's pulse quickened. "What do you need me to do?" "We need you to testify again, Maya. We need you to come to Washington and speak before the committee one last time. Your testimony could make the difference. It will give us the final momentum we need to get this bill across the finish line." Maya hesitated for only a moment before replying. She had come this far. How could she say no now? "I'll be there," she said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes." The flight to Washington, D.C. was a blur. Maya had been in the Capitol many times since she'd first testified before the Senate, but this time felt different. This time, the stakes were higher. The Fletcher Act was a real, tangible piece of legislation that could change the lives of countless veterans. If passed, it would improve VA tracking systems, create more funding for homeless veterans, and ensure that veterans with classified service records, like Samuel, would no longer fall through the cracks. But even as the plane touched down, Maya felt a familiar unease settle in her stomach. The weight of her role in all of this was overwhelming. She wasn't just advocating for a cause anymore. She was advocating for thousands of lives, thousands of Samuel Reeds, forgotten and abandoned by the very system that was supposed to protect them. When Maya entered the Senate hearing room, she was greeted with the usual mix of intense stares and whispering. The committee had already been seated, but the room seemed to quiet as she made her way to the podium. She looked out at the row of senators sitting before her, their expressions mostly unreadable, their eyes trained on her. Senator Whitney, who had invited Maya to speak, stood at the podium next to her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we are here today to discuss the Fletcher Act, a bill named after Samuel Reed, a man who gave his life to serve this country, only to be abandoned by the very system that was meant to care for him. The bill before you today is a result of the tireless advocacy of Maya Daniels, who has dedicated herself to ensuring that no veteran is forgotten. Maya, the floor is yours." Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She hadn't expected to be so emotional, but she felt the weight of Samuel's legacy in that room. He wasn't just a man she had met on the streets. He had become the face of all the invisible veterans. He had become her reason for fighting. She stepped forward to the microphone, the room silent as she prepared to speak. Her mind raced, but the words came to her naturally. "Thank you, Senator Whitney," Maya began. "I'm here today because of Samuel Reed, a man who gave everything for this country, only to be forgotten. I'm here because there are thousands of other men and women like him, veterans who served our nation with honor and dedication, but who now live on the streets, without recognition or support. Samuel's story isn't unique. It's a story shared by too many, and it's a story that has to end." Her voice cracked, but she continued, pushing through the emotion. "This bill, this act, it's about more than just a piece of legislation. It's about restoring dignity to those who have lost it. It's about ensuring that no veteran is left behind. We can't undo the damage that has been done to Samuel Reed, but we can make sure that no one else suffers the way he did. The Fletcher Act is about acknowledging the invisible veterans. It's about changing the system so that veterans like Samuel are no longer forgotten. Maya paused, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the eyes of several senators. Some looked uncomfortable, some seemed moved, but Maya could see the glimmers of change in their expressions. She had their attention. That was all she needed. "Please," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. "This is our chance to make sure the mistakes of the past are never repeated. It's time to give our veterans the respect, recognition, and care they deserve. It's time to make sure no one is left behind." The room was silent for a long moment before Senator Whitney spoke again. "Thank you, Maya. Your words have been heard." The Fletcher Act passed the Senate with overwhelming support just days later. It wasn't the end of Maya's work. Far from it. But it was a monumental victory. The act became law shortly thereafter, and over the next few years it began to make a real difference. The VA tracking system was reformed. Funds were allocated to help homeless veterans, and thousands of veterans who had once been invisible began to receive the care they needed. Maya continued her work with the Samuel Reed Memorial Fund, overseeing its growth and ensuring that it reached those most in need. She became a powerful voice for veterans across the country, speaking at rallies, conferences, and in front of lawmakers. But even as she worked tirelessly for change, Maya never forgot Samuel. He had been the catalyst for everything she had done, and his memory lived on in the thousands of lives she helped. Each time she saw a veteran receive the care they deserved, each time she heard a story of someone's life being turned around, she thought of him. She visited his grave at Silverwood National Cemetery regularly, always pausing to reflect on how far they had come. And each time, she would leave a small token of gratitude. A simple note, a promise to keep fighting, a quiet thank you to the man who had been forgotten by so many, but whose life had changed the course of so many others. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your support keeps the stories coming.